Hi, I'm Brett Ullman. Welcome to Navigating Everything, the channel where we look at helping you navigate tough topics like mental health, parenting, how to be a better man, and many others. Today we're looking at our third interview with Paul Lavergne, and we're going to be going through a question that I get quite a lot. Now, the first interview we did with Paul looked at help my kid is looking at porn. The second one was help my spouse is looking at porn, and we'll put those into the description. Today, it's kind of just a very simple one. Help I'm looking at porn. As I travel and speak, this is a question I get probably on a nightly basis. And so I just want to bring Paul into the call here. Paul, before we begin, why don't you just tell people who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into today.
Sure. Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for having me on this call to do this interview. So I'm a therapist in private practice. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, and I'm a sexual recovery therapist with the American Association of Sex Addiction Therapists. Founded by Doug Weiss in Colorado, USA. So he was my mentor when I started off doing this. So I'm in private practice in Peterborough, Ontario, although I have clients all over the place. I work remotely as well as face-to-face. And about half my caseload, I would say, deals with compulsive sexual behaviors. So I work with a lot of porn and sex addicts and their partners.
Good. I think what you do is such an important role. I think more and more we need people specializing in those things. Just as someone who travels across the country, I just hear there's so much need in that. So let's start with something simple. And I think more it's probably a question of hope. Like for someone who says, Paul, I'm either addicted or I'm casually looking at porn, I want to stop. Is there hope for someone like that?
Oh, absolutely. I work with a lot of clients that have been successful in changing their behaviors and have quit porn and other compulsive sexual behaviors. Which is the term I use. You'll hear people use the term porn addict, sex addict in the literature and in different things online. So I use the term compulsive sexual behaviors as an umbrella term to include those things. But yeah, I have a lot of clients who are years into their recovery living clean and sober, free from all compulsive sexual behaviors. So for sure, it absolutely is possible.
So Paul, why don't you explain to us what addiction is? I think some people might be confused even what that term means.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Not everyone that looks at porn is an addict any more than anyone that drinks alcohol is an alcoholic. And most people kind of intuitively understand that, right? So among the clinical literature, in the DSM-5, sexual addiction isn't formally recognized. Unfortunately, they're a little behind the times. But the World Health Organization has something called the ICD, which is International Classification of Disorders 11, version 11. And I believe in 2018, they came out with a compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And so that's the term that I use, as compulsive sexual behavior. And when someone comes in and they're saying like, I'm not really sure, like I think I have a problem with this, I'll say, well, let's find out. Let's ask you a few questions. And if you're watching this right now and you're not sure, I want you to think about these questions that I'm going to ask you and answer them honestly. So the first thing I ask is, have you ever tried to cut back or stop your sexual behaviors and failed to do so? That's number one. Number two, have you continued to use porn or fill in the blank despite negative consequences? Okay. So negative consequences could be financially, relationally, to yourself personally, self-esteem, loss of integrity, loss of honesty, hurting other people, lying. Those are all negative consequences. Yet you continue to engage in the behavior. And so those first two questions are the main two questions that we use to talk about any behavior. And these questions can be applied to porn, alcohol, drinking, gambling, shopping, eating, almost anything. Number three, has your behavior and use of porn, well, we'll just kind of focus on porn and everyone understands like it kind of, can include other things, but has your use of porn escalated? Okay, so for older guys like me, I'm 52. So when I say, yeah, remember Playboy, like people 25 and under have never even seen a Playboy, right? Or even 30 and under, they've never even seen a Playboy. They kind of know it exists. But for guys more my age, I'm like, remember Playboy? It's like, yeah. Well, actually, no, let's back up more. The Sears catalog lingerie section, guys always chuckle about that. So like, that's where it started. Just childhood curiosity usually, right? Nothing malicious there. But then you discovered Playboy, then Penthouse, more explicit, Hustler, more explicit. Then the 80s came, that's VHS, so now it's video. Then the 90s came and it's DVD. And then the 2000s came and it's online, high def, hardcore pornography. So that's about 7 levels of escalation that I just described there. And then the other kind of escalation is I watch it once a month, twice a month, once a week, twice a week, once a day, 3 times a day. So the frequency increases. And every single person I've ever worked with that has an addiction has escalation, right? Do you find this? So this is the fourth question.
You're bouncing a lot.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So question 4. Yeah. So question number 4: do you find it taking up more of your time, thoughts, and energy? And this goes hand in hand with the escalation. I've had clients who have come in, and I had a 24-year-old young man had come in, and I think we calculated about 8,000 hours of porn that he had already watched in his life. Wow. Right? So he started when he was about 11 or 12 and up to 24. So literally every day, sometimes hours a day. Number 5 is, do you experience repetitive, intrusive thoughts, urges, or cravings? And an intrusive thought is it's experienced in your mind as something that just pops into your mind again and again. And you're not necessarily wanting it there. Like, and for guys that are trying to make changes and want to quit, they don't really want to be thinking about porn every day, but they are thinking about it every day. So it's intrusive. And it goes from somewhere along the way, it shifts from I want it and I like it to I need it. I need it. Okay. And the 7th question would be, are you developing or have you developed a double life to hide your behaviors? And are you lying about it either directly or by omission? So a live omission. So I kind of run through that with someone, and it doesn't, like, what did that take? 5 minutes? It took 5 minutes to figure out if they're an addict, right? And so I've never told anyone they're an addict. I just ask them the questions. And then I say, based on your responses, you fit the model. You fit the criteria, let's say, right? It's not about labeling anyone. I don't really care about the label. The model fits though. So it's a way to conceptualize the behavior, but it's important to break through the denial that might be there, with a lot of people that it's no big deal. I really don't have a problem.
It's interesting for students today because they've never seen the progression that we've seen in life. Like,
yeah.
I'm 49. I remember no internet, right? We remember that's when you had
the
Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
And then today, just kind of normal. It's funny when you're talking about like the progression through the years, because adult bookstores went from something down some back alley to something just on the main. I remember I spoke once at a Christian school in the morning, and I went out for lunch, and so I had a phone with me, so it had to be in the last 12, 15 years. And so I'm on my phone, which I should have been, walking up. There's a Subway restaurant, and then there's an adult bookstore. And so I open the door, I walk in, and I realize as soon as I walk in, I'm not in the Subway, I'm in the adult bookstore. And I must have had this scared look on my face, and the guy's like, Subway? I'm like, yeah. He goes, it's the other door.
Right.
So I walk out of the adult bookstore, and there's the staff of the Christian school coming to Subway for lunch. And I'm walking out of and as someone who speaks for a living, I always have something to say. I was speechless, and the blood drained from my face, and they all burst out laughing, saying, we watched you walk in, and we watched you quickly come out.
Right.
But it's just funny, that's not normal. Like a Subway restaurant in an adult bookstore.
Well, and you're talking about it being pushed from the dark fringes of culture right to the forefront, and a great example of that is Pornhub, which is in serious trouble right now, and maybe that's another conversation, but full page billboard ads in Times Square. Yeah. Okay. So that's how far the pendulum has swung from almost mainstream. Well, really porn is really mainstream right now. Yeah.
So back to the person listening, and I mean, we're talking guy or girl, I mean, I've dealt with students young elementary school age all the way to my oldest guy I've ever talked to is in his 90s. So like this is for everyone.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
watching porn and they want to stop. Right? Some people, we have to encourage them to stop or other things like that. But this is someone who says, "Hey, I want to stop." What are some steps they need to kind of break free from this struggle, this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my first thing I want to say is, please don't wait. Don't put this off. Don't fool yourself into thinking that, like, if you answered yes to more than two of those questions that I just asked, you need to be honest with yourself that this has developed into something that's going to escalate and be chronic. Okay, addiction is chronic and progressive. That's important to understand. It will not get better on its own, right? I got to say that again. If you're compulsively watching porn X many times a day or a week and masturbating and doing other things, it will not go away on its own. And it's progressive. It will escalate. All right. I've never had a client who goes to rub and tugs and sleeps with escorts and chats with webcam girls ever say to me, "Yeah, I thought I'd be doing that one day. That was a goal I had by 25 to be sleeping with escorts." It creeps. You slide into it. It creeps up on you, and it's inch by inch. This stuff goes inch by inch, right? But it takes time to, it always starts with the porn and masturbation, and then it does take time, but less and less time now than ever before because of technology and how easy it is to access these behaviors. These behaviors are escalating faster than at any time in human history, right? So fear and shame will keep you trapped, right? And the only way to break through that is to make a decision to be honest with yourself first. I have a problem and I need help. And then to be honest with someone else. So the first thing I do is set bottom lines with my clients. So a bottom line is, what are you not going to do anymore? Okay, so for me, as a man, I've been sober 15 years from my bottom line behaviors, which are no porn, no masturbation, no lies or secrets, and no inappropriate contact outside my relationship. So when I say sober, I'm just borrowing the word from AA. It means I haven't broken those bottom lines. So I haven't had a drink in 15 years. Those are my drinks. I have 4 drinks. I haven't had them. Okay. So we set those. And most of the clients it's the same bottom lines, but they set them. Like, they don't have to be the same as me, but that just kind of is the 4 most common things. And the no lies or secrets is non-negotiable. That's one that I do set for them. You cannot continue to keep secrets about this. So we set your bottom lines, and the next thing we do is we set boundaries that make it harder to break your bottom line. So boundaries are sort of rules and structures that they put in place, very practical. In the first few sessions, by about the 3rd session, my clients have an actual implementable, practical action plan written down in black and white that they can start doing, right? And this is important because they need to feel like they're doing something different, right? And you won't get a different result unless you engage in different behaviors, new behaviors. So it's always about access, Brett. So it's and this is interesting, especially with younger guys with cell phones. I'm like, okay, look, your brain has paired the black rectangle with sexual gratification, and being alone in the room with it will trigger a dopamine response so powerful that it'll send you to an altered state in 30 seconds. So what are you going to do about that, right? And so there's different things like putting filters on, which we'll talk a bit more about that later. But really quickly, it's like, okay, let's come up with some really common sense rules here, like. I'm not going to go online late at night when my wife's in bed. Or if I'm home alone for the weekend, I'm not going to go on the internet. Or I'm going to put reporting and blocking software like Covenant Eyes. So if I, whatever I do on the internet, my wife or someone is going to get a report once a week that shows every site that I visited or tried to visit, right? And this is also at the point where I see like how serious people are, how willing they are to do whatever it takes. Because the operating principle in recovery, Brett, is do whatever it takes. That's how you have to think, right? And I've had guys waste months trying to negotiate with me over their phones, Oh, well, I need it. I can't live without my phone. I can't get a dumb phone. And then after 3 months of constantly slipping up in exactly the same way every time, late at night in bed on their phone, it's always the same. They finally realize, yeah, I'm not stronger than this, and they'll get a flip phone or something, which are getting harder and harder to find, by the way. Like another few years, I don't know if you'll even be able to buy a flip phone, period. So
is that when you called it a dumb phone, it's the opposite of smartphone, right? You're talking about,
yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah, a dumb phone, dumb it down, right? So some other things are, I clean house, I call it. So if you have downloads, get rid of them. Secret emails, get rid of them. Dating site profiles, gone. A lot of times social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, gone. But let's just get rid of that. Those are all access points. Block and delete contacts. If you're someone that's acted out with other people, you're chatting with girls and stuff, block, delete. I've had guys even change their phone number, because there's some of them, there's so many people that they're interacting with in a sexual way. It's like, you know what, just get rid of the number. That'll solve a lot of your problems, right? So clean house, if you have all the devices, if you have old hard drives in the basement with pictures and movies on them, like go get rid of those, so do a real thorough deep cleaning. And so again, this is all like in the first week. So those are some of the things that I start to walk people through.
I like the practical aspect of that.
Yeah, well, you got to be practical, right? And especially in the first, say, month. See, addicts have perfected the art of manipulating the systems around them to live the life they want to live. So they're good at manipulating time and situations and people and saying what they need to and figuring out the system so that they can still get what they want when they want. So I impose, and I know all this because I'm a recovering addict, so I know how they think, right? And so we're going to impose a lot of structure on you in the first little while. And some guys don't like that too much. Well, that's too bad because you have lived in this alternate universe where you do what you want and there's no consequences. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. There are consequences. So let's impose some structure and this will help you. And then over time, you're going to internalize a lot of these things that you're learning, and so that you don't need the structure so much. Like I had filters for 8 years, I think, on all my devices. And then I kind of liked it after a while. I went from resenting the fact that I needed one to tolerating it to appreciating it. It's like, hey, it's got my back. Nothing's going to come up I don't want to see. And I don't have one now. I haven't had one in a few years, but I don't have a desire to look at porn or act out in that way. But yeah, for 8 years, I had filters on there. They were my friend. So an important idea to get across to people that they don't really know anything about recovery or how that works is that it's a system, and there's different parts of that system, and it's all of it together that works, right? So it's kind of like losing weight. Like you can say, well, if you take in less calories than you burn, you're going to lose weight. And it's like, well, hold on a second. It's like, well, you have to take in less calories, but there's macronutrients, there's carbs, fats, proteins, there's alcohol in there. There's working out, how long, how many calories do you burn? There's cardio workout, there's aerobic and anaerobic, there's intermittent fasting, there's the times a day, like there's all of it. And you have to do all of it to be successful, right?
Well, I use the term navigating everything. Like there's
navigating everything
with this,
right?
There's it's a holistic view of it.
Right. So step one for most people is get a coach or a therapist. Okay. And I want to say a quick note about therapists here is most therapists out there have little to no training in treating compulsive sexual behaviors. Okay. And it's through no fault of their own. A lot of them are great therapists and well-meaning, but there's not a graduate school that I'm aware of, and anywhere in Canada at least, that offers even a module or a course on treating this sort of thing. Okay. So they have no specific training on that. So you need to look for the letters CSAT, Certified Sex Addiction Therapist, or AASAT, which is what I am. I don't have it on the screen there. I'm a SRT, which is Sexual Recovery Therapist, and that's with the ASAT, American Association of Sex Addiction Therapists. So CSAT or AASAT. If they don't have those letters, they're going to be of very little value to you. I'm not saying they can't help you at all. And if there's no one else you can find and you just need to go talk to someone, then fine. But there's going to be very limited value of what they can do. People with CSAT or ASAT designations, also many of them are recovering addicts like myself. So they walk the walk and they get it. They've been there and they know what works. Don't expect, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way. I'm not disparaging faith leaders or the faith community at all, but don't expect them to be a good resource for you either. Okay. Many pastors or faith leaders, bishops, rabbis, deacons, priests, whatever, give well-meaning but very unhelpful advice and sometimes damaging advice. Some of the messages can carry a lot of shame with them. You're not righteous, pray harder, do this to atone, read your Bible. If you had faith, you could have, so many unhelpful things. And again, they don't have the training for this. And I've had, unfortunately, many people over the years that have shared stories about going to their faith leaders and it not helping or sometimes even making it worse, and myself included. So let me break down the system for you, okay? So 1 is coaching or therapy. 2 is accountability. 3 is ongoing reading and learning. 4 is group participation. 5 is developing emotional awareness and properly handling your triggers. And 6 would be creating the presence of, and this is what I call focusing on the positive. So it's instead of don't do this, okay? Don't look at porn is not the goal. The goal is to build such a great life that porn isn't interesting or necessary anymore. So the presence of positive activities, interests, hobbies, connections, goals, alignment with your values, all of those things that create a great life for you. So long-term sustainable change is an emergent quality of your recovery system, okay? So it's like, if you're calculating a percentage, you don't actually directly calculate a percentage. That's an emergent quality of knowing how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So to calculate a percentage, you have to take the correct numbers, divide them in the proper way, and then what emerges out of that is your calculating of the percentage. And it's the same with recovery. That's why just stop is not helpful. Because it's about really a better way to say it is do all these things, and what emerges is your clean and sober lifestyle.
I like when I speak on mental health, I talk about exercise, because exercise is medicine and sleep is medicine and diet is medicine. It's this foundations. And I like your points are a mix of getting help from specialists to reading on your own to being part of group. It's all kinds of stuff in one. I really, really like that.
Yeah. Well, and I find that's the best thing. Can you recover and not go to a group? Yeah. Can you recover and never go to a therapist? I don't know, because I don't talk to those people, obviously. but probably, Brett, most people that quit smoking don't see a coach, therapist, or go to a group. They just quit. So, but in most of the cases, especially with the more serious behaviors, you simply cannot do it on your own. You need to build a system and a structure around you to support your goal. Yeah.
So in the faith community, when I hear people speak, often we talk about the term accountability. I was at a guy's house once, and I challenged people to use Covenant Eyes, and so he had this brand new MacBook Pro, and he said, "Look, I just put Covenant Eyes on it." And I'm like, "Great." And we had become accountability partners to each other. And so I said, "Can I see your computer?" And he said, "Sure." So he gave it to me, and he's showing it to me. And I said, "Have you saved everything?" And he said, yeah. And I click reboot, and I'm holding the option key down. Now, I don't know if you're a Mac guy. Like, you can run Boot Camp, which runs another operating system. So, like, I would
okay. I
often
didn't
run
know that.
Windows. So as I'm doing it, I said, I just want to see if you're running another operating system, to which he grabs his computer out of my hand. So I'm there with my wife and children and his wife and children, and he's physically grabbing his computer back. And I'm like, this is just a joke. Like, you wanted me to be your accountability partner, but really, you're just lying to me. Like, what are your thoughts about accountability?
Well, remember what I said about how addicts are expert at manipulating the systems around them? That's
Mm.
exactly, and that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Boy, do I look good. Boy, I'm putting covenant eyes. Oh, Brett Ullman's my partner. Look, my wife's watching. I'm doing everything that looks good, but in the meantime, I have a backup plan, right? And it's so sneaky and conniving, right? But that's actually very typical to how a lot of people think, because being an addiction is really you lose touch with reality, right? But let me talk about accountability. So I love this topic. So I have guys, come in and say, well, I tried accountability and it didn't work. And this is more like in the circles you move in the faith community, this is a little bit of a buzzword, right? Like accountability partner, right? And they're like, well, I tried that and it didn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, explain to me how you set that up, right? And the story invariably is something like, well, I texted my buddy Joe and said, hey, I want to be accountable to you. I'm struggling with some stuff on my phone, or some kind of sin pattern, or like some vague, it's usually pretty vague, right? Like they're kind of saying what it is, but not really. And they're like, I just want to be accountable to you. And the guy's like, okay, yeah, sure, bro, no problem, right? So then the guy goes a couple days because he doesn't have a system in place, right? No therapy, no coaching, no group, no reading, no homework, no empowerment, doesn't understand the cycle and the triggers and all that. So he's just kind of going on willpower and white knuckling it. So he lasts about 3 days, and he texts his friend, and he's like, oh, hey, bro, I messed up. And his friend's not really sure what to say. So he says like, oh, well, that's too bad. I guess, better luck next time. Or if they're Christians, they're like, oh, I'll pray for you, or the other guy is like, yeah, I messed up too, right? Because they're all just a bunch of 20-year-old guys that are looking at porn every 3 days. And they think if they tell each other that they look at porn every 3 days, that's somehow going to make it easier to not look at porn every 3 days. But it really doesn't, right? So then they say, well, that doesn't work. And I say, well, let me explain how accountability is supposed to work, okay? So you pick the right partner, first of all. They have to be trustworthy, mature, and able to keep your confidence, and not actively struggling with an addiction themselves. That's the first thing. Number two, you delineate clearly to them what your bottom lines are. Okay, I'm going to check into you because I'm in recovery for addiction, and my bottom lines are no porn, no masturbation, no lies or secrets, no inappropriate contact with other women outside of my marriage. They're like, okay, got it. Next thing, I'm going to text you every day for 90 days and tell you how I did. Every day for 90 days. Every day for 90 days. Okay? And the guy's like, sure. Here's what I want you to say. I'm going to text you and say, my bottom lines are good. And you're just going to text back, great, thanks. That's it? Thanks. Okay. Good job. Something like that. If you break your bottom lines and you have a slip, say you watch porn, you're going to text them and say, hey, I watched porn today. And your accountability partner is going to text you back 2 things. What did you learn? And what are you going to do different? And that's it. That's the end of the conversation. And you answer him. So every time you slip, you're going to learn. And you're accountable. And that's how it works. So that's kind of how I try to get it set up. Now, for guys that get into groups as well, and there's 3 main 12-step groups, SLAA, SA, and SAA, and also online groups, one called X3 Groups, which is a faith-based group online. And there's accountability built in because they usually facilitate a way for members to talk to each other, either by exchanging phone numbers or setting up an app like WhatsApp or GroupMe or something, where they have a closed group and then they can communicate back and forth that way. But this is a really key part of recovery because it's unbelievably powerful when you're having a trigger and you want to act out, to just simply get outside of yourself and reach out to someone and let them know what's going on. And 90% of the time, it'll just kill that craving. But what a lot of people do is they wait till after they mess up before they check in. It's like, no, check in when you're feeling the craving or the urge to act out. That's when you check in. So that's what I think about accountability.
One thing I like about your language is you've used the word systems a number of times. I created a new talk for men called Men Navigating Everything. And one of the things that I began to realize was it's not about challenging men, it's about challenging men's systems. And so I began reading books, Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg, but Upstream, Dan Heath, Chip Heath, one of the Heaths. But I have a video with all these books in it. But I mean, you live and die on your systems. It's the systems that we need to create, whether it's for faith conversations, diet, being better men, or for this conversation today.
Remember, you reminded me of a saying, you aspire to the level of your goals and you fall to the level of your systems, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if a guy is not making progress in his recovery, I'm going to do a diagnostic analysis of the system and find out why. There's always a reason why.
So kind of along the same lines of accountability, we talk about accountability filters. Now, online accountability, there's filters which filter pornography, open DNS, Covenant Eyes, and then we have accountability, which is it gets sent to someone. I think you mentioned like Covenant Eyes. It can actually do both, but it would send to your accountability partner or whoever, here's the questionable sites that someone might have visited. What do you think about filters and blockers, I guess, is the question.
I think there's a place early in recovery, and some people actually really need them, especially if you're in a relationship. I find with single guys that aren't married or that don't have a girlfriend, even if they get a filter, they just find ways around them, and they're not really that effective because there's really no consequences, right? And men, well, we'll just say men for the sake of argument, are the ones that we're talking about trying to quit porn. They only learn through pain, really. So having your wife get an email that shows you're on looking at teen porn on Pornhub is painful for you. So this is a deterrent. But for a lot of young single guys, like they get a filter, and like I have one guy I'm working with, he's 20, he's had Covenant Eyes for months, and he slips every 2 days because he just uses a Tor browser or something like that. I don't even know how all this stuff works. He just has a way, he just goes on and gets around it, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's that addict trying to figure this, like they're really, really good at figuring out these systems, right? But yeah, there's definitely a place for them. And, I've seen them be effective as part of a system though, right? It's like an airbag, okay? It's airbags alone won't necessarily stop you from dying, but an airbag and a seatbelt and, the things built into the car and the reinforced doors and that's all of the safety system all together will maximize your chance of not being seriously injured, right? So yeah, filters, and also, Brad, there's the partner that can get a lot of reassurance from knowing that her husband or boyfriend who's, struggling to make these changes, they have the reassurance that, hey, I'm going to get a report every week that's going to tell me what they're doing. And the fact that they're willing to be transparent about that can give them reassurance.
I know,
but they're not the answer though. Like filters are not recovery. They're just a part of the system.
I know parents have, like when parents have young kids, I often say open DNS, which just blocks porn even from the router.
Right.
Circle by Disney. Have you ever noticed that Circle by Disney is a square, by the way? It's not a circle.
Yeah. Well, I never heard of it till last year or early this year. And a client was like, I have this thing called Circle, which is a square. And it doesn't go right on the route, like it blocks it right at the source, I think, right?
I think your router goes into it, and then your kids' phones, iPads, whatever, all route through it, and you can actually
Oh,
like shut it off, time limits.
right.
And the new one, which I'm interested in learning more, is Bark.us, which
Okay.
has, they say AI built into it, which sounds like there's a robot built into it. But you know, like, so if you're, let's say you have a young daughter or even a young son, and someone's beginning to groom them over Messenger or something, it
Right.
reads, show me your whatever. Like it must read that, and it would then send the
Right.
parent a text, and so it's a
Okay.
new kind of software.
Yeah. So it recognizes certain phrases and words and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know of any clients that have used Bark, although I've heard of it. I think through you, I saw it on one of your videos or on your website. Covenant Eyes, Net Nanny, Accountable to You are the most common filters. They all seem to work equally good. And I often get reports from a lot of my clients because sometimes the partners don't want to see the reports. They just want me to let them know if there's something bad on it because it can be quite upsetting to them even to get a report, even if there is nothing bad. It's sort of triggering to a lot of partners. So I'll get the report, and if there's anything that looks fishy on it, I'll send a quick text to a client or something, just as that's part of the support that I provide as well. So if I get something from you, like you've uninstalled it or something was flagged, I'll check in and just, hey, what's up? Everything okay? And 90% of the time, it's some legitimate reason that something got flagged, because none of these filters are perfect, and they'll often pick up on things. And one of my frustrations early on, like when I had the filter, was anytime I tried to research or porn addiction, like if you just typed in porn addiction,
Yeah.
you're blocked because of the word porn, or sex addiction, you're blocked, right? So I had to, get all of those unblocked one at a time until I was able to access what I needed. So
I once had my accountability partner, and they wrote me and said, Brett, 3,800 sites were flagged this week. I'm building my talk on sex and pornography. But you're right. It used to be, chicken breast would pop up, and it would be like,
right,
but they're getting
right,
better.
yeah,
I like the idea that it's part of a system, but it's not in and of itself the only thing.
right. Yeah, and the only exception might be in the context of protecting your children. Everyone should have those if you have children anyway, right? Just to protect them from inadvertently coming across things. Have a filter, a DNS, a circle, something on there. If your kids have devices, and you talk about this a lot in your talks, right? As a parent, you're responsible to do something about that, because unrestricted access is a very, very bad idea for children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people have these systems in place. They're doing all the different things, and they fail. They fall. What do they do to? There's a song that says, "We fall down, we get up." I kind of like, but it's what do you suggest to get back on that healing process?
So yeah, I kind of run through this with clients, and I sort of explain the idea of a slip versus a relapse, and what that looks like. And in the old, in the hardcore 12-step model, like say AA, one drink is a relapse. So you have one bottom line: don't drink alcohol. So if you don't drink for 20 years and you have one drink, you got to give your 20-year chip back. Start at day one, and you have relapsed. Okay, so and it's not a criticism of that model. I just think it's a little rigid, and it's sometimes not helpful. So I talk about a slip. So a slip is like this. So you're going along, you're starting to put your system together, you're doing well, you're getting some traction, and then you watch porn for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, maybe it's not long, but you broke the bottom line. Within 24 hours, you tell your partner, you tell your accountability, like your wife or girlfriend, you tell your accountability person, because remember, you're checking in every day with them. And then when you come and see me, which is every week or two, you're going to let me know, and we're going to talk about it. What did you learn? What do you do different? And if you're going to group, you're going to tell the group. And then you're just basically right back on track. Okay. So I used to lead an online group with X3 groups. So for about 5 years, I led that. And it was much more helpful for guys to go, say, 8 months where they slipped up twice, let's say, in terms of that feeling of making progress and feeling good about the recovery. Instead of like 3 months, you slip, no, back to day one. You go 3 months, you slip, no, back to day one. So you've been in the group 8 months, but you're like 1 month sober, okay? And it just can be quite discouraging, right? And it's too black and white. So, but there is such a thing as legitimate relapse. So relapse is I watch porn and something called the abstinence violation effect kicks in, which is a thinking distortion that says, I've already watched porn, so I blew it, so why not go again, right? It's like you're on a diet and you think, well, I ate a cookie, so I might as well have a bag of cookies. It's completely irrational, but it sort of makes sense to you in the moment for some reason, right? So they binge, they don't tell anyone, they go 2 or 3 more days. The first day it's 5 minutes, then it's an hour, then it's 3 hours. And then they're like, oh man, like I can't tell my wife now, so I'll just not tell her. And you know, I've been checking in with my accountability person, but you know, that's kind of really helping. So let's forget that. And you know, this group is stupid anyway, so let's not go to group. And you know, Paul's not really helping me, so I'm going to cancel my session with him. And so they're basically back to the old lifestyle of a double life, lies and secrets, and not being accountable to anybody. So that's a relapse. And that can go for days, weeks, months, or years, Brett. Right? So I don't know if that's helpful to delineate the two of those things. But, you know, the short answer to your question is, see, I prepare people, right? 83% of guys will have 1 to 3 slips in the first 12 months of recovery. So I just say, look, statistically speaking, this isn't a free pass or anything, but you're going to have 1 to 3 slips. So let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about what you're going to do when that happens. So we have a plan.
I like the idea too. Like one of the books, I forget which one, talked about as you create your systems, you need to have positive reinforcement. So if you're back to 0, it's really demoralizing, as opposed to I messed up, but my trajectory is still in the same place.
Right.
My system is still intact, and I begin down that path again.
Yeah, well, I remember reading an article about the Apollo landing, like the one where they put them on the moon, and apparently, and this was done in the 60s when, like, I have more computing power in my cell phone than all of NASA had in that room, right? So apparently they were off track like 96% of the time, right? So basically what the astronauts did the entire voyage is they took turns correcting their course. That was their job for however many days or weeks it took. I think it took a week to get to the moon or something, right? And that was their job. Just correct the course, correct the course, correct the course. So I tell clients it's about progress, not perfection. As long as you're still heading to the moon, you're going to get there. If you deviate a little bit here and there, hey, that's fine. In fact, that's going to happen. It's not about being perfect.
That's a great analogy. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've always challenged people to do, I think people should be readers. And when people tell me they don't read, it's like, we all can read, unless we're talking, there's something like some sort of disability or a special need thing with reading.
Yeah.
But I say to people, even if you read 5 pages a day, I think people should have a book on the go. And I always think a book on sexuality, pornography is great for especially the men that I speak to. What are some book suggestions that you would suggest?
Yeah, so Pornland, Gail Dines, Big Porn Incorporated, Melinda Tankard-Reese. These aren't about recovery. These are about the industry, okay?
Yeah.
Clean. So my mentor, Doug Weiss, has written a ton of stuff, but I recommend Clean, Final Freedom, and Lust Free Living. Going Deeper by Eddie Caparucci, Going Deeper. Breaking the Cycle by George Collins. And Pat Carnes is one of the pioneers in this field. So any book by Pat Carnes, but especially Out of the Shadows and Don't Call It Love. And I've written an ebook. It's about 60 pages for couples called The Damage Control Protocol. And you can put a link up to that. It's free on Kindle. You can get that on Kindle on Amazon. There's others like it's great because we actually have a lot of great resources out there now that we can use. But those are some good books that come to mind. And did I say Sex Addiction 101 by Robert Weiss? I think I forgot that. Sex Addiction 101. There's a book and a workbook. And that's probably the most common one that I recommend to guys trying to start recovery.
I'll make sure I add them in the list below. I do I'm not just plugging my own book, but my new book has an entire chapter on pornography as well. So from my standpoint, that's my most current kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Before we kind of look at closing out, what are some other, this is maybe a more catch-all question, what are some more mitigating factors that might affect someone's recovery?
Yeah, it's important to understand, like when someone comes in and says like, I'm here because I have I think I have a porn addiction or compulsive sexual behavior. That's what got them in the door. But there's also a lot of, there's a story behind that, and, there's their whole life and everything that's going on. And one of the first things I need to do as a good clinician, I need to be asking the right questions. So is there a comorbidity, which is just a clinical term meaning something else going on at the same time, basically. Okay. So is there, how's the alcohol consumption, the weed consumption? Are there other hard drugs that you're using? Anything else I should know? A gambling problem. The most common thing is mood disorders, the most common being depression. So the rate of depression among sex addicts is double the normal population. The normal population is about 12%, and people with compulsive sexual behaviors is about 25%. Are they bipolar? Do they have anxiety? A lot of anxiety, like beyond what is, like we all have anxiety, and it's actually healthy to have some anxiety and normal, but beyond that sort of, is it clinically impairing them in some way? So I need to know those things, right? And one of the things that's really come up in the last few years is adult ADD and ADHD. And this is way more common than I thought it was. And I had a client a few years ago that went to, there's a world-renowned specialist in adult ADD called Dr. Bilkey in Barrie, Ontario. And my client went and saw him, and Dr. Bilkey said to him, I have never met an adult with untreated ADD that didn't have an addiction. So I went, wow. Like when I heard that, I really was like, okay, wow, I really need to start paying attention to this. Because, the reason with ADD especially that you are aware of it and treat it with the right medication, if that's what you need. Not everyone needs medication. But there's a lot of overlap. So people with ADD and a porn addiction, they don't delay gratification very well. They have very poor impulse control. The endless novelty of the internet is very, very interesting to them. Like if you don't have ADD, it's sort of like, oh, look at all those windows, that's cool. But if you have an ADD brain, it's like, whoa, I gotta click on all of them now, right? Like that's really how they feel, okay? And like that's new and shiny, that's new and shiny. So it's so easy to go down, and clients that have ADD, like they're the ones that will go on like the 6-7 hour porn binges, right? Because it's just feeding that desire for instant gratification and endless novelty. And they get bored. People with ADD, and they get bored easy, right? So if you have depression or ADHD and you need to get on medication, then go get on medication. And that's, I just refer that out. I say, go talk to a doctor or a psychiatrist. That's not my, I'm not allowed to diagnose in any way, right? But the reason with a mood disorder that you get it treated is because addicts will regulate their moods with the behavior. So if you have like your moods are quite up and down, like even a moderate, not extreme like bipolar, but a moderate curve, while I'm having a down day, I need to feel good. So we'll look at porn and masturbate, and that brings me up. Or I'm feeling really up and I want a reward and I deserve this, so I'll use porn to help fuel that high, right? So it becomes a co-regulator of your emotional state. So when you're able to basically, with whether it's natural treatments or medication, the idea is that with the depression, you even out the swings in mood and also elevate your baseline. Like if you're feeling like a 3 out of 10 every day, like you basically feel like crap all the time, we need to bring that up to at least a 6 or a 7 if we can.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this video will be very helpful for a lot of people who are struggling or have, I mean, we've talked about loved ones who struggle or kids who struggle. Paul, if someone wants to get hold of you, if they want some help with this or have questions, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, I am available. I work with clients one-on-one and with their partners. So I work with the recovering person, the partner, and together as a couple. And I am taking on clients. I'm booked about 2 or 3 weeks ahead. But if you reach out to me at my email, turning point, all one word, the number 4me at gmail.com, turningpointforme@gmail.com. Just send me an email, say, hey, I saw your video on Brett's channel, and I work remotely. I've talked to people all over the world with a, wonder of modern technology like we're doing now. I mean, you're not that far away. You're an hour from me, but, I can literally do sessions with everybody. And if you're watching this in December of 2020, we're going to hit a 20-day lockdown, and I'm still open. I'm actually still allowed to see people in person. I just have to follow the protocols, but I am available even through the COVID pandemic. So please reach out, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you, even if you have any questions about someone else or for yourself. I'm here to help.
So I will put Paul's contact and all the books he suggested in the description of this video below. Paul, thank you so much. This has been 3 videos. Again, I'll put all those links in the bottom. Thank you so much for coming on. If you're listening today and you have thoughts, questions, comments, or even if you're like, oh, I got a really great book on pornography or any of these things on addictions, please just send them through in the comments. For everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Brett.